So this is Churchill's Shadow, and this is going to be chapter 1. Walter and the Nazi Threat. 1st of July, the Duke of Windsor's home, Chateau de la Croix, Cap d'Antibes on the French Riviera. 2 men stopped outside the main gate. Oberg, a tall, balding German, was an assassin. He was a clinical killer for an elite paramilitary group, the SS, Stormtroopers, or Schutzstaffel. He was chosen for this job because of obedience and loyalty until death to his Führer, Adolf Hitler. It was a long walk up the hill to the villa, and his guide irritated him with his constant nervous chatter. A pulse beat in his neck as he reined in the desire to kill him. Frederick, a Frenchman, was a local, hired for 50 francs to escort Oberg to the villa. He was pushing a cycle with a box on the front advertising Frédéric Criol, artisan boulangerie. He glanced at Oberg, who looked nothing like a delivery boy, and wiped sweat from his forehead. Oberg put his hand on the handlebars to halt the bike. This is it. He took a long look at the curving drive sweeping up to the villa. Wait here. He disappeared from view into the immaculate garden and headed to the back of the property. Frederick hopped from one foot to the other. The Duke of Windsor sat at his desk in the drawing room, facing the window with a view of the path to the back door. The Duke was a small, neat man with fine tailoring you would expect from someone who'd once been the King of England. He gave a quick nod of recognition as the German passed the window. He picked up his pen and looked at his wife. "My dear, I want to invite the Churchills to spend the next weekend with us." "That would be nice, David." Wallis looked up from her book. "I'll make sure we put chicken consomme on the menu. It's his favourite, you know. Thompson told me last time we were together at Chartwell." Wallis touched the Cartier diamond bracelet, a wedding present from the Duke, and resumed her reading. The Duke finished his letter to Churchill and a short note for the German. "When I talk with Winston about Germany, I want him at his ease, in a relaxed atmosphere. I'm hoping to persuade him England and Germany can get along. His scare stories will do none of us any good." The Duke was still angry. He'd been forced to abdicate so he could marry the woman he loved. He felt a stately duty to persuade Germany's loudest critic, Winston Churchill, that the Nazis meant no harm. He rang the bell for the maid and got up to meet her in the hall. He closed the door to the drawing room and whispered, "Take this letter to the post office and give this note to the man at the back door." The maid opened the door a crack. She stumbled back, gripping the hat stand on seeing Oberg and the long, raw scar traversing the length of his face. She thrust the note in his hand and shut the door. Oberg glanced up at the high shrubbery surrounding the villa. He had chosen his lair. "Now to report to Sturmführer Schellenberg. Not good at German words, I'm afraid. And wait for the orders to kill Winston Churchill." He smiled when he saw the Frenchman had cycled away. Now he had a reason to kill him too. 2nd of July 1939, Himmler's office in Berlin. The second most important man in Germany, Heinrich Himmler, the Reichsführer, leader of the Third Reich, was watering the houseplants in his office. His pallid skin, framed by dark receding hair and glasses, made him look more like a university professor than a military commander. His secretary, a tall blonde with bright intelligence eyes and an immaculate SS uniform, knocked on his door. She waited outside, next to the youngest high-ranking officer in the SS, Sturmbannführer, stormtroop leader Schellenberg. Himmler's personal aide. They waited in stiff silence for the order to enter. Hier ein Kommen. She opened the door, followed by the young, narrow-shouldered officer who hesitated at the threshold. Excuse me, Reichsführer, SS Sturmführer Schellenberg is here. Good morning, Schellenberg. What have you come to tell me? Himmler handed the empty watering can to his secretary for her to refill. Schellenberg opened the file in his hand. It's good news, sir. We had 2 meetings with the Duke of Windsor. Politically, he disagrees with the British government and his brother the King. He's willing to collaborate with us and waits for the most favourable moment to make his decision public. Himmler caressed the leaves of a large aspidistra. Ah, if only he had remained king. No Englishman could have ignored a king who was a friend of Nazi Germany and who sought peace. Will he come to Berlin to broadcast on our behalf to the British? We've offered him 50 million francs, which will allow him to live in the luxury to which he is accustomed. May I suggest we give him a little more time? He's invited Her Churchill to his house next weekend to persuade him to support us. We will, of course, be listening to everything they say. We will listen, but understand one thing, Sturmbannführer. Winston Churchill is not to leave France alive. Himmler returned to his desk. That will be all. Schellenberg did not move. Sir? Himmler looked up. What? If I may suggest, it has occurred to me, well, Churchill is just an old man who holds no political office. If the Duke convinces him of our good intentions, he may be able to return to England and convince others. Himmler waved him away. Our Führer considers Churchill his most formidable enemy. You have your man in position? Yes, sir. It's Oberg, a most reliable man. The Duke is comfortable with him because he thinks he's a diplomat. Then radio Oberg and let him know the operation has been approved at the highest level. We cannot afford to miss this excellent opportunity to eliminate Her Churchill before he causes any more damage. Sturmbannführer Schellenberg snapped his heels together and performed a perfect Nazi salute. Heil Hitler! 3rd of July, the Chateau St George's Motel, Normandy, France. Miss Shearburn tapped on Churchill's bedroom door and entered without waiting for permission. Churchill looked up from his newspaper as she handed him his mail. She stifled a smile as Churchill wiggled to sit upright in bed like a chubby pink baby. Good morning, sir. A man is here from the Secret Service. Churchill beckoned the man forward. Good morning, Downward. This is unexpected. Downward touched his thin moustache. Sir, you will find an invitation from the Duke of Windsor among your letters. I have it on the best authority. German agents will be waiting for you at his villa. I advise you to return to England immediately. He twitched while he waited for a response. He saw his proximity to Churchill as an opportunity for promotion into the orbit of men with power. Churchill grunted and put down his papers. He reached over to the side of the bed and rang a bell to summon the maid. He sat back upright in bed. Thank you, Downward. I will follow your advice with all haste. Downward turned to leave, staring just a little too long at Churchill's young secretary. She was striking. Her dark blue suit revealed voluptuous curves, setting off her strawberry blonde hair. Churchill slipped out of bed and walked over to the window. Thompson. I need Thompson. Send him a telegram. Ask him to meet me at Croydon Airdrome the day after tomorrow. Oh, and tell the staff we're leaving immediately. Yes, sir. Miss Shearburn gathered up her notepad and rushed downstairs to the reception desk of the hotel and asked to use the telephone. She got a connection straight away. Hello, may I speak to Mrs. Pearman, please? Good morning, Mrs. Pearman. It's Miss Shearburn. I've been asked by Mr. Churchill to send a telegram to Mr. Thompson. Can you help? Ah, yes, just wait a minute while I look him up. Miss Pearson flicked through an index file on her desk in London. Yes, here he is, she said, running her finger down the card. Inspector Walter Henry Thompson, Special Branch, Scotland Yard. Retired 3 years ago, after serving as Mr. Churchill's bodyguard for 15 years. Seems he might have a change of career because his home address is Thompson's Grocers, Beulah Hill, Norwood. I'll take down the telegram and send it from here if you like. Downward stood listening at the end of the reception X. Thompson, he mumbled to himself. He calls for Thompson, the damn grocer. Later, as she was accompanying Churchill in the car on the way to the aerodrome at Evero, Miss Shearburn concentrated on tidying up the scribbled dictation she'd taken earlier. She was relieved when Churchill stopped talking and rolled down the window to look at the fields of grain undulating in the sunshine. His eyes were moist and his head dropped. Miss Shearburn put down her notebook and looked at him. She waited for him to speak. She had become familiar with his black dog depression days, but this was different, worse. Her heart pounded as she waited a long 30 minutes for him to speak. His voice was low, like distant thunder. Before the corn is gathered in, we shall be at war. 4th of July, Thompson's grocery shop, Beulah Hill, Norwood, South London. The clatter from outside the shop alerted Walter to Bernie's return from making the morning deliveries. Walter's tall, freckly nephew had inserted pieces of stiff card between the spokes of the shop's bike to make it sound like a motorbike that he imagined owning. Though Walter was a few inches taller than Bernie, their physical resemblance was becoming more marked every day. They both had handsome, symmetrical faces with high cheekbones and smooth skin. Local people often thought Bernie was Walter's son rather than his nephew. Thompson's grocery store was on Beulah Hill, a road parallel to the main A23 London to Brighton road. The street was lined with large red brick Victorian houses. Walter's store was in a parade of local shops in lower middle-class England. Bernie fell through the door. "Uncle, Uncle, a telegram!" He thrust the envelope at Walter. Walter took the envelope and placed it on the counter, staring at it as though contaminated. This was the second telegram he'd received in his life. The first, a few stark words to inform him his father was dead. From that day, he had stepped in as father for his 2 younger sisters and nephew. In his innocent excitement, Bernie pressed on. Well? He was 16 and had no idea telegrams only ever brought bad news. "Aren't you going to read it? I've never seen a telegram before." Walter thought hard. He took a long breath, smoothed back his hair and stood to his full 6 feet. Who could be dead? Dead, Uncle? Did I just say that aloud? No one. Kate's in the parlour. Stella's at home getting ready for a wedding on Sunday. You're flapping around in front of me. Your mum is next door in the tobacconist. We're all present and correct, our little family. Well, all right then. Go and park your bike round the back of the shop and we'll take a look with your Aunt Kate. The smell of baking wafted from the parlour and travelled around the shop. "I think it's time for tea," Walter smiled at Kate as he entered. "Young Bernie has met the postman at the top of the hill and bought me a telegram." Kate, a petite, fair-haired woman of 47 with a flawless complexion and a heart-shaped face, was at the sink. "Oh my goodness, I'll put the kettle on. If in doubt, brew up, eh?" She wore a home-sewn cotton dress covered with a crisp white pinafore tied in a bow. She had been married to Walter for 25 years, and now Walter was retired. They were enjoying their precious time together. Kate placed 3 Art Deco cups and saucers on the table next to the vase of summer flowers. "There, doesn't that look beautiful?" "Ah, not as beautiful as you." Walter reached for his wife. Kate knew his moves and slipped under his arm, stroking it as she passed. "Ooh, and you, dear." She blew little kisses from a distance across the room. "I've got some scones in the oven. Would you like one?" Walter winked at her and gave her his winning smile. Bernie came through the back door. Kate stifled a giggle, hiding her flushed cheeks from her young nephew. Walter waited until the tea had been poured before opening the telegram. Bernie's eyes widened. Walter read the message aloud. "Meet me, Croydon Aerodrome, 4:30 p.m. Wednesday, Churchill." Strange order for a grocer, Walter smiled, attempting to lighten what he knew would be a difficult moment. "What does that man want?" Kate's hand shook as she took a sip of tea. Bernie gulped his drink and stood up to leave. "What, Mr. Churchill, who used to show us films?" "The very same." Walter folded the paper. Kate sat rigid and narrowed her eyes. "But surely he knows you've retired from Special Branch. They can't make you go back now, can they?" She took a cotton handkerchief from her apron pocket. "And we've only just become a family again. After all, it's Stella and Martin's wedding at the weekend. Your little sister will be Mrs. Martin Gold." Walter reached across the dining table and took her hand. "I feel like a proud father. Young Stella married. Oh, that reminds me, I've been talking with Martin's father." The shop bell rang and Stella, Walter baby's sister, burst through the door with an orange crate full of linen serviettes. She entered the parlour and set them down on the dining table. "Morning, family." She was petite and pretty with long fair hair and bright blue eyes. "Sorry to barge in. I have to fold all these into swans before the wedding. Any helpers?" Bernie cut in, not wanting to be late for his final day at school. Not me. I'll be off them, Auntie and Uncle. Tell us what that old Mr. Churchill wanted when I come in on Friday." Kate opened the oven and took out the scones. "Any exams today, Bernie?" "Mais oui," called Bernie, mounting his bike. "French oral. What good will that be? Waste of time." He breathed in the aroma from the baking. "May I take one of those to school with me?" Kate put 2 scones in a brown paper bag and handed them to Bernie at the back door. "Try your best, Bernie. You never know when a language might come in handy." Stella folded the serviette. "See, it's easy." Walter picked it up, unfolded it and pretended to blow his nose on it. Stella feigned a punch at him and laughed. "You beast! It's all that the Golds would let me do towards the wedding, so I'm going to do it well." "I'll help you." Kate passed Walter a scone. "Would you like one of these first?" "No, I can't. I have to get to work, but I'll be back at 6 if you don't mind giving me a hand." Stella kissed Kate and feigned another punch at her brother before dashing to the door. Walter buttered one of the hot scones. "Come and sit with me a moment, my love. I've been looking at the accounts and frankly, the shop's not doing very well. When we went to Brighton to meet Stella's future in-laws, Mr. Gold, Ludovic, made me a proposition. The upshot is there's a motor dealership and a petrol station closed down next to his bus garage. I've just found out the rent is actually less than we pay here for this shop. But if it's closed down, surely business can't be good." Kate pulled away and began to wash the teacups. Walter walked over to her and held her around her waist while she clanked the cups in the sink. "Ah, yes, but Ludovic has guaranteed us the sale of fuel for all his buses and taxis if we take it on." "Oh, I'm not sure. Walter, what about your sister, Emily and Bernie? They'll struggle here without us." "Ah, there's a very large car showroom with 2 flats above it. Enough room for us all. I could mend and resell some second-hand motorbikes." He kissed her neck and she stopped her work. "No one can afford a car these days, and I've always loved tinkering with my own bikes. Just think of it, you and I paddling on Brighton Beach after work each day, sharing a plate of cockles." Oh, Walter, that would be a dream come true. I never liked the thought of Stella leaving us to live in Brighton. She turned and gave Walter a teasing kiss on the lips. How big is that showroom? Could part of it be divided off for a cafe for the drivers and waiting passengers? Walter kissed her on the forehead. What brains you got in there. And with the 2 flats, we can take Emily and Bernie with us and make it a real family business. We've all been upset by the thought of losing my little sister. This way we can have a small business next to the Goals' successful transport company and keep the family all together. They were interrupted by the shop bell. Customers, my dear, and I haven't finished putting the new stock up on the shelves. Walter blew a kiss for Kate. As he turned to enter the shop, she caught his arm. He stopped and pulled her towards him. He lifted her on the dining table and planted the smallest of kisses on her lips before making his escape. 4 women shuffled around in the shop looking at unpacked boxes, waiting to be served. My apologies, ladies. May I help you? No, Mr. Thompson, we're quite content to wait and see what you've had delivered, said one of the women. We know you're a very busy man. Walter took off his tie, unfastened the top button of his shirt and removed his stiff white collar. He took care removing his silver cufflinks and rolling up his sleeves, revealing his tanned, muscular arms. He climbed a wooden ladder to place tins on the high shelves. The women studied him. Lovely day, Mr. Thompson, said one of the women. Yes, very nice, Mrs. Spencer. Walter climbed down the ladder. May I serve you now? The women gave each other little nudges when he bent over to retrieve goods for them. Having made their purchases, one by one they left the shop and waited outside for each other. He's always so polite, whispered one woman. Oh, he's got no eyes for you, another replied. Why do you say that? Oh, he never reacts to your little suggestive remarks. Kate shut the door to the shop to drown out the giggling women. It was lunchtime and she turned the sign to read closed and lowered the blind. Walter pulled her towards him. Kate tried to wriggle free, but she was trapped within the circle of his arms. Walter nibbled her neck. How would you like a toffee apple on the seafront tonight? We could take a sneak look at the garage and a proper look on Sunday after the wedding reception. Oh, Walter, can I please tell Emily and Bernie? They'll be so excited at the news. Kate kissed his cheek. I'll just be a few minutes. Back in time to make your lunch and anything else you may need. She blew him a second kiss and slid from his grip and removed her apron in one small action to head for the door. Once alone, Walter reached down and rubbed his shin, where the bone had been chipped in a fight with a thug. He had retired from the police force in 1935 with the annual pension of £207.07 per annum. His career had begun in 1911 and had ended with the last 15 years guarding Winston Churchill as his personal bodyguard. He took out the telegram from his pocket and reread it. Perhaps the old man only wants me to run an errand. 5th of July, Croydon Aerodrome. Walter stood at the edge of the runway. He watched the Paris plane come to a stop in front of him. Out bounded Churchill like a bull terrier. Walter noticed he'd lost a little more hair, but his round face was rosy with health for his 65 years. Despite the glow of his skin, his expression was grim. Walter held out his hand to greet his old boss as he walked towards him. Hello, Thompson. Churchill shook Walter's hand without missing a stride. Good to see you. Get the baggage together and bring it on with you to Chartwell. There's a good man. He opened the back door of a waiting car, clambered in, followed by Miss Shearburn in his wake. The car roared away. A second car drew forward. Walter had his arms full of Churchill's cases and boxes and put them in the trunk. He slid into the passenger seat next to the driver. George! By George! George! Walter gripped his former sergeant's large flabby hand. I thought you were living up in Scotland. He noticed George's short brown hair was showing signs of grey at the temples, but his large brown eyes still flashed with mischief. His wide face beamed as he slapped Walter on the back. "You still got a handshake like a bloody vice inspector? How the devil are you, George? Enjoying your retirement?" "Well, thanks, and no, I'm bored to bits." "So how's the grocery trade going then? Enjoying a booming business?" George pulled away from the aerodrome. "Well, no good trying to pull the wool over your eyes, George. It's not been going well at all. But we're interested in a new business, a garage in Brighton." "Blimey, you always were a bit of a grease monkey with that bike of yours." "Yes, it's bikes I want to repair and resell. Kate and I are both very excited." "What's all this about then?" George's face clouded. Well, it seems we're back in business." "What? You mean you're working with the old man again?" "Yep, and he wants the old team back, and he wants his favourite son to take care of him. You, Walter." "Well, there's no need to be jealous, little brother, because I'm not coming back. He doesn't need me anyhow. He's not even a member of Parliament at the moment." "Doesn't seem to blooming well matter to the old man's enemies. The Nazis want him brown bread." George drew his index finger across his throat, causing the car to swerve. "George!" Walter grabbed the wheel. "What, lost the nerve for a bit of excitement, Inspector?" George swerved the car again. "You're like a breath of fresh air, George." George smiled. "Not changed too much then, have I?" "Well, it looks like you've been able to stuff yourself with apple pie while I've been away. If you're back working for the old man, I hope he's got a decent cook, or you'll be hightailing it back to Scotland." "You cheeky basket. Think I've got a bit fat, do you?" George veered the car again. "Still practising your stunt driving, George? You could have been a racing driver with those skills." The sun shone on the tree-lined roads leading from Croydon to Chartwell. "So, Inspector, are you ready to go back to work?" "I don't think so, George. I'm too old and rusty since I retired. And just so you remember, I'm ex-Inspector Thompson to you." "Fine, ex-Inspector. For your information, I'm retired too. But here I am, driving the car for the old man again. I got a call last week. Quite frankly, with the trouble and strife gone off with another man and the children grown up, I'm glad to be back in service." "Oh, George, I'm sorry." "Nah, it was 3 years ago, but I don't like being on my own. This job suits me just fine." "Who's paying you?" "The old man, £3 a week from his own pocket, but it wasn't me he wanted guarding him." No, you know very well what I'm talking about. He knows if he has me, he might be able to lure you away from the grocery trade." Walter let out a small sigh. "I don't want to steal the old man's thunder, but he's just run back from France. Got a tip off some of Hitler's agents were planning to knock him off at the Duke of Windsor's place. I've seen the latest intelligence reports. Hitler's far more worried about Churchill than he is about our Prime Minister." "Well, I suppose that's where Hitler and I do agree." "Remember those famous words last time he was voted out?" George lowered his voice into a comical rendition of Churchill's accent. "In the twinkling of an eye, I found myself without an office, without a seat, without a party, and without an appendix." George chuckled. "So, do you care enough about the old man to come back, ex-Inspector?" "Well, he's sharp and critical, but it's all a facade. I'd like to try and help him, but I think I've done my bit. I'm the only man left in our little family, and I've been acting as an honorary father to both Stella and Bernie. I have to admit, I quite like the quiet life. And now there's the possibility of our new garage to get underway." "Well, good for you, ex-Inspector. I, on the other hand, am a loyal guard dog." George let out a long, low howl. Walter laughed and patted him on the head. George brought the car to an abrupt halt on the short gravel drive in front of Churchill's country home. The large red brick gabled house was quite ugly, but Churchill had been captivated by the grounds the moment he set eyes on the valley. It was sheltered by tall beech woods to the south and commanded sweeping views over the Weald of Kent. By far the house's best view was over the rolling hills. Before Churchill bought this extravagant house, Walter had accompanied him on several long walks to survey the land. "New hedges here, Thompson. We can divert this channel, dig it out this little bog and put in a swimming pool." Walter felt a twinge in his back as he looked over to the swimming pool. He remembered excavating it by hand with Churchill by his side, giving commands and helping by emptying the wheelbarrow. He surveyed the huge expanses of grass. "I want several acres of perfect lawn, Thompson. Please get up early and see to it." Walter had groaned at the time, but in truth he'd enjoyed the hard work and exercise that kept his body in good shape. He glanced over to the trees in front of the house and shook his head as he recalled one of his many arguments with Churchill about security. "I just can't protect you here, sir, from any sniper from the south. The hill and the trees provide excellent cover for anyone breaching security. Surely there are many other fine houses that would at least give me a fair chance of keeping you in one piece." He walked round to the side of the house and entered the property through the door to the walled garden. He glanced at the familiar low garden wall Churchill had attempted to build. Churchill had claimed the wall as his own, but Walter had instructed the masons to demolish the precarious structure and rebuild it straight and even. Walter smiled as he pictured the bricklayers loitering and smoking and striking up conversations about nothing in an attempt to look innocent when Churchill inspected his wall. And here we will stop until the next episode. Goodbye.